Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more moonlit love. Lord Cedric Vale bowed his handsome head for the king's blessing with one hand resting on Lady Rowena Blackthorn's waist, as if a low and bright mirror had been a chair someone had forgotten in the corner. Aloan stood beneath a carved wolf statue with a cup of cold wine in her hand and told herself that if she survived the evening without being sick on anyone's shoes, she would count it as a triumph of character. It was a modest dream, but she had learned to admire modest dreams. They were harder for other people to steal. The ballroom of Moonmere Castle glittered with silver lamps, blue glass, and enough noble teeth to furnish a graveyard. Every family in the werewolf court had come to watch Cedric receive public favor for his new match. The first royal blessing of the winter season was more than a sweet custom. It told a kingdom which couple had the crown's confidence, which house would rise, which invitations would open, which debtors would become friends, and which abandoned women were expected to smile until they disappeared. Aloan had been expected to disappear. Her gown had once been gold. Now it had the tired color of old straw and the stubborn dignity of curtains that had seen a war. Her fair hair, thick enough to shame any court wig, had been braided with plain ribbon because the pearls promised to her as a bride had been taken back by Cedric's mother in a conversation so polite it deserved a knife. The pearls had not heard as much as the conversation. Across the hall, Cedric bent lower before King Adrian Ravenshade. Rowena leaned into him, her mouth small and perfect, her red silk gown bright enough to start rumors on its own. She looked at Aloan over Cedric's shoulder. Her smile said, "Poor thing." Aloan lifted her wine cup a finger's width. "Try not to strain yourself carrying him," she murmured. No one heard her except the old woman beside the pillar, Dame Mabel of the laundry, who gave a dry little cough that sounded suspiciously like laughter. The court herald raised his staff. "By moon and law, the Alpha King shall bless this chosen pair." Cedric's shoulders swelled. Rowena's fingers tightened on his sleeve. A hush moved through the ballroom like a hand smoothing velvet. Then the music stopped. Every violin died at once. The lutes made a confused sigh. The royal drummer, a thin young man named Elias Quill, tapped one last beat from terror rather than artistry. From the king's pool at the far end of the hall, something black rose through the water. At first Aloan thought it was a throne cloak. Then a long neck lifted, glossy as midnight oil. A black swan climbed from the moon pool onto the marble dais, dripping water in neat royal circles. Its eyes were dark garnets. Its beak held one torn strip of white lace. The court breathed in. Aloan knew that swan. 7 months earlier, before Cedric had put his loyalty in a locked box and sold the box to House Blackthorn, Aloan had found the creature tangled in a hunter's net near the frozen reed beds. It had hissed at her with a majestic outrage of a duchess discovering soup in her shoe. Aloan had cut the cords away while the swan nipped her sleeve, stole her hair ribbon, and then pressed its beak to her palm as if granting her the right to continue existing. She had thought it was an animal. The longer she lived at court, the more she doubted any animal would behave so badly without a legal education. The swan shook itself. A crown of water flew across the dais and struck Cedric squarely in the face. There was a sound from the court that was not allowed to be a laugh, which made it much better than a laugh. Cedric jerked upright, dripping from brow to collar. Rowena gasped as her red silk caught a spray. The swan stared at Cedric, then leaned forward and snapped at his trouser leg. "Remove that bird," Cedric barked. The swan bit harder. King Adrian did not move. He sat on the moon throne in black velvet and silver mail, looking as if no court disaster had ever surprised him because he had ordered several better ones for breakfast. He was young for a king, perhaps 30, with black hair, winter blue eyes, and a face so beautiful it seemed almost rude to have been given to one man. He was taller than any man in the hall, even seated, the line of his shoulders broad and controlled beneath his dark cloak. The wolf mark of his crown shone at his throat. Aloan had seen him only once before, across a chapel yard. She remembered thinking that he looked less like a king than like the last thing a liar saw before becoming honest. Now those winter eyes found her. The hall seemed to tilt. King Adrian rose. The swan released Cedric's trouser leg and flapped once, as if announcing the next act. The king stepped down from the dais, past Cedric and Rowena, past the herald whose mouth hung open like a gate without hinges. He walked straight across the marble floor to the forgotten corner beneath the wolf statue. Aloan's fingers tightened around the wine cup. If he had come to send her out, she intended to go with grace. Possibly after throwing the cold wine at Cedric. Grace had limits. Adrian stopped before her and held out one gloved hand. The first dance, he said, his voice deep enough to settle in the bones, belongs to the woman who is still standing. The entire court turned to stone. Eloan looked at his hand. She could refuse and remain invisible. She could accept and become a problem so large the court would have to give it a chair. Behind the king, Cedric whispered, "Your Majesty, she is not fit." Eloan heard it. So did Adrian. The king's eyes did not leave her face. "Lady Brightmere, are you unwell?" "Not yet," she said. One corner of his mouth moved. A brave answer. A practical one. My favorite kind. She placed her hand in his. His glove was warm. His fingers closed around hers with controlled strength, not trapping, not timid. The touch ran up her arm like a warning bell, and for one foolish heartbeat she forgot Cedric, Rowena, and the cold wine cup. She forgot everything except the strange sensation that the room had opened a door, and the king was asking whether she had the nerve to walk through it. The musicians sat frozen. Adrian turned his head. Master Quill. Elias Quill nearly swallowed his tongue. Majesty. A waltz. Of course, Majesty. A dignified one, or one that suggests the court has not just been bitten by a swan. The king's expression did not change. Eloan laughed before she could stop herself. That small laugh was a mistake and a rescue. It cracked the frozen hall. A few older ladies blinked. Dame Mabel looked proud enough to claim her. The swan waddled toward the musician's platform, opened its wings, and hissed until Elias began playing. The first notes rose, uncertain, then smooth. Adrian led Eloan to the center of the floor. "Do not look at them," he said quietly as his right hand settled at her waist. The touch was correct by law and disastrous by sensation. His palm rested over the faded gold fabric, firm, warm, impossible to ignore. Eloan's breath caught. Cedric had touched her in public 100 times, but always as if showing ownership of a candlestick. Adrian touched her as if the entire kingdom had become narrower and brighter beneath his hand. "Where should I look?" she asked. "At me." His eyes lowered to hers. "See if I step wrong enough to lose the kingdom's respect. Is that a common danger? Only with women who look ready to stab someone with a wine stem. I was not going to stab anyone. No, I was considering the soup spoon. It has reach." His mouth curved. "Then I have chosen well." He moved. Eloan had been taught to dance by a mother who loved music and a father who counted every candle before lighting it. She knew the steps. Yet the first turn almost stole her balance, not because Adrian was careless, but because he was not. He guided with the smallest pressure at her waist. A command felt through cloth and breath. The court blurred. Silver lamps slid above them. Cedric's wet face passed at the edge of her sight and vanished. There, Adrian murmured. Still standing. Barely. Barely counts in battle and at court. You speak from experience. More at court. In battle, people are honest about wanting your throat. She looked up sharply. He was closer than she expected. The clean scent of winter pine and iron warmed the air between them. His gaze flicked to her mouth, not long enough to be improper, just long enough for her skin to remember it. Eloan's cheeks heated. The swan glided around the outer edge of the ballroom, no longer wet, its black feathers shining beneath the lamps. Whenever a noble whispered too loudly, it snapped at a hem or boot. The court adjusted its manners with inspiring speed. At the end of the dance, Adrian did not release Eloan at once. The final note faded. His thumb moved once against the back of her hand, a small private stroke hidden by their joined gloves. "Lady Brightmere," he said aloud, "the court recognizes you." The words were simple. Their effect was not. A royal first dance had the weight of law. It did not make her rich, loved, or safe. It did make her visible. It made any insult against her an insult close enough to the crown to become inconvenient. Cedric understood. His wet jaw tightened. Rowena understood, too. For a heartbeat, her face showed not triumph, but fear. Then the swan gave a loud, accusing honk and shoved Cedric's abandoned blessing cup with its beak. The cup rolled across the marble, leaving a thin green trail. Eloan smelled it before anyone spoke. Bitter almond. Marsh mint. The stilling draught used by cruel handlers to dull a wolf scent sense and confuse a mate bond. Her stomach dropped. Adrian's hand closed around hers again, no longer courtly. Protective. "No one drinks," he said. The guards moved at once. Cedric stepped back. "This is absurd." The black swan looked at him, lowered its head, and charged. Cedric fled 3 steps with the grace of a man chased by truth and poultry. The swan caught his trouser cuff. Elias Quill, perhaps from nerves, began playing a tune usually heard at village fairs when a baker fell into a flour bin. Half the court choked. Eloan stared at the green trail. 7 months of shame shifted in her mind. Cedric's sudden disgust. Rowena's sudden arrival. The letters that had never reached her. The day Cedric had looked at Eloan as if her scent had turned sour and said, "I cannot bind myself to something tainted." Something tainted. Adrian's voice lowered beside her. "You know that smell." "Yes. Tell me." The old Eloan would have swallowed the answer, because powerful men dislike noise from wounded women. The new Eloan had been danced into the middle of the floor by the Alpha King and watched a black swan assault her former fiancé's trousers. Life had already become unreasonable. She might as well join it. "Stilling draught," she said. "Enough to muddle wolf scent. Enough to make a mate doubt what his own blood knows." The court erupted. Cedric wrenched free from the swan. "She lies. She has always been dramatic." Eloan turned to him. "Cedric, the most dramatic thing I have ever done is not faint while your mother explained that poverty is a moral odor." Dame Mabel laughed out loud this time. Cedric's face darkened. "You will regret this." Adrian stepped between them with such smooth menace that the air seemed to kneel. "She will not regret speaking under my roof." "Majesty," said Lord Varick Blackthorn, Rowena's father, rising from the front table. He was a narrow man with a scholar's hands and a butcher's eyes. A spilled cup and a misbehaving bird are not grounds to insult noble houses. The swan turned slowly toward him. Varick stopped talking. Adrian glanced at the cup. "The royal pool has been fouled. The blessing rite has been attempted under false influence. That is treason against moon law." Rowena's fingers were white on her fan. "Father." Varick did not look at her. "An inquiry, then. By proper hands." "Yes," Adrian said. "By proper hands." His gaze returned to Eloan. She felt the court lean toward her like a forest in wind. "Lady Brightmere cut a moon guardian free from iron netting last winter," Adrian said. "By the old law of this castle, the guardian's chosen witness may speak for the water when the water has been poisoned." Eloan blinked. "I beg your pardon." The black swan waddled to her side and pressed its cool beak against her knee. Adrian's eyes warmed by a fraction. "It appears you have been appointed by the swan, by ancient law. Written by whom? Possibly the swan." Elias Quill whispered from the platform. "That explains several clauses." The swan honked. Adrian raised his voice. "Until the moon court sits, Lady Eloan Brightmere is under royal protection and holds authority to question any servant, noble, cupbearer, musician, or idiot who touched this pool." The last word landed near Cedric with admirable aim. Eloan should have been terrified. She was terrified, but terror had room inside it for other things. Anger, hope, a wicked, sparkling urge to see Cedric try to bow again while missing half his dignity. Adrian leaned closer, his mouth near her ear. "Can you do this?" His breath stirred the fine hair at her temple. Her pulse answered before her pride could. "Yes," she said. "Good. I may ask rude questions. I encourage them. I may accuse the wrong person. Then we will correct it. I may throw something. Aim away from the musicians. We are short on courage there." Elias called. "I heard that, Majesty, and agree fully." For the first time that night, Eloan smiled without tasting blood. Then Cedric reached for her arm. "Enough," he snapped. "You are coming with me." His fingers closed around her wrist. It was not a hard grip by a guard's measure. It was hard enough to wake every memory of being told to be quiet while men arrange her life. Hard enough to make the world narrow to his hand on her skin. Eloan did not think. She pivoted, hooked her shoe behind his ankle as her father had taught her in the stable yard, and tipped Cedric backward into the silver punch basin. The basin rang like a chapel bell. Punch rose in a glorious red wave and baptized Lord Cedric Vale from chin to boot. The court gasped. The black swan applauded with its wings. Adrian looked down at Cedric, then at Eloan. The soup spoon was spared. "I felt merciful." "It suits you." His gaze lingered on her wrist where Cedric had grabbed her. The humor left his face. He did not touch the bruise, not in front of everyone, but his jaw tightened until Eloan felt oddly sure that Cedric's future had just lost several comfortable chairs. Cedric struggled up, red punch dripping from his hair. "She attacked me." Yes, Adrian said. A clear improvement in the evening. That was the moment the court began to change. Not kindly. Courts did not become kind between one waltz and one punch basin. But they became curious. Curiosity was useful. It made even cowards pause before joining a pack. Aloan stood at the center of the ballroom with the Alpha King's protection, a moon guardian at her knee, and her former fiancé soaking in fruit wine. Her stomach still hurt. Her hand still shook. But when Rowena looked at her now, the smile was gone. In its place was something Aloan recognized because she had worn it herself. A woman trapped inside a choice that had begun to bite. The inquiry began before dawn because King Adrian did not believe poison should enjoy a full night's sleep. Aloan was given a chamber near the East Gallery with a lock so heavy it looked borrowed from a dungeon and a window facing the moon pool below. Tessa, the little lake maid who cared for the pool fires and reed beds, arrived with hot water and a tray of bread. Tessa was 17, round-cheeked, quick-eyed, and so short she seemed in constant danger of being mistaken for a footstool by arrogant men. Her brown curls had escaped every pin. She carried herself with the grim focus of a person who had chased sacred water birds through kitchens at midnight. "My lady," Tessa said, setting down the tray. "The Black One says you are to eat." Aloan stared. "The Black One says?" Not in words. In biting. Whom did she bite? Me, but gently. Like a countess with opinions. Aloan laughed and then nearly cried because the sound came so easily. She sat at the small table and took the bread. Does she bite everyone who lies? Mostly the trousers. She has standards. Tessa leaned closer. Last spring Lord Pember said he had not taken the last honey cake. She removed the entire left knee of his breeches. Was he lying? He had crumbs in his beard. Aloan looked toward the window. The black swan floated below on the pool, dark and graceful. If she was a moon guardian, she was a strangely greedy one. "I met her in the winter," Aloan said. "She was caught near Brightmere Marsh. I thought a poacher had set the net for ducks." "Iron net," Tessa said. "Bad work. Moon guardians can wear feather or fur or skin, but iron holds the shape tight. You cut her loose. She bit me twice. That means she liked you. How many bites mean dislike?" Tessa considered. "You would be asking from the floor?" The answer made Aloan like her at once. By sunrise, Aloan had washed, changed into a borrowed blue gown from the royal stores, and braided her golden hair down her back with 2 small moonstones Tessa had produced from nowhere. The gown fit too well to be chance. Its bodice was simple, its sleeves soft, its skirt light enough to move in. It did not make her look rich. It made her look alive. When she entered the inquiry chamber, every conversation stopped. King Adrian stood by the long table, speaking with Captain Orsane of the Royal Guard. In daylight, he looked even more impossible, black hair brushed back, jaw clean-shaven, silver crown plain on his brow. His dark coat was cut close, high the throat, with no jewel beyond the wolf mark. He looked less like a decorative king and more like a blade that had learned manners. His eyes moved over Aloan once, careful and contained. Contained did not mean cold. Aloan felt the look in places no borrowed gown had any business reaching. "Lady Brightmere," he said. "Majesty, you slept." "Somewhat." A diplomatic answer. "The bed was very large. I feared if I rolled too far, I might enter another county." Tessa made a tiny noise behind her tray. Adrian's eyes flickered with amusement. "We will send a map next time." Next time. Aloan told her heart not to behave like an idiot in a bell tower. The inquiry chamber filled with people who had reason to sweat. Cedric arrived in a sober gray coat that could not hide the faint red stain near his collar. Rowena entered beside her father, pale beneath rouge. Lady Purnell Vale, Cedric's mother, wore black lace and a face prepared for martyrdom. Lord Varick Blackthorn carried a physician's case, though he was not a physician, which Aloan found both dramatic and unhelpful. The Black Swan entered last. She came through the main door as if invited, which perhaps she had been by herself. Around her neck gleamed a thin silver ring marked with old runes. She waddled to the chair beside Aloan, stared until a guard removed the chair, then settled on the rug with satisfaction. Elias Quill sat in the corner with a small harp. "Am I required?" Adrian said. "The old rite says music must accompany truth. Does it specify good music?" "No." A relief. Aloan began with the cup. She was not a scholar. She was not a high lady with spies in every kitchen. But she knew scents because every werewolf child learned them before letters. She knew bitter almond and marsh mint. She knew that stilling draught did not fall from the sky into royal cups. Someone had carried it. Someone had wanted the blessing right confused. She questioned the cup bearers first. One had filled the cup from the silver pitcher. One had carried it to the dais. The third had added moon water from the pool. The third was Tessa's older cousin, a nervous young man named Robin, who began sweating before Aloan asked anything. Cedric leaned forward. There, a servant. Must we continue humiliating noble houses? Robin looked ready to faint. Aloan studied him. His fear was too open, too helpless. She remembered fear like that. It did not feel like guilt. It felt like being shoved in front of a cart. Robin, she said gently, who told you to add the water? It is always added, my lady. Yes. Who watched you? His eyes darted to Lord Varick and away. The swan lifted her head. Lord Varick smiled. The boy is easily frightened. Low servants imagine faces in smoke. The swan rose. No, Aloan said softly. Everyone looked at her. She had not meant to command a moon guardian. The swan had not meant to obey a lady in borrowed sleeves. Both of them were surprised. The swan sat again, but she ruffled her feathers in a way that promised later violence. Aloan turned to Varick. My lord, why did you bring a physician's case? My daughter was upset by the spectacle. Rowena's hands tightened in her lap. Then you have salts? Aloan asked. Naturally. May I see them? Varick's smile thinned. You are not trained. No. But the swan is staring at your case as if it owes her rent. Elias plucked a nervous note. Adrian held out his hand to a guard. The case. Varick hesitated just long enough. The case opened. Inside were vials of lavender oil, salts, a roll of bandage, and a small green glass bottle with no label. Rowena made a sound. Her father shut the case too fast. The swan shot forward, seized the bandage roll, and yanked. The case flipped. Vials scattered over the table. The green bottle rolled toward Aloan and stopped against her hand. She did not touch it. She leaned down and smelled. Bitter almond. Marsh mint. The chamber went silent. Varick rose. That is medicine for my nerves. The swan lunged under the table and bit his boot. Varick kicked. His foot struck the table leg instead. A silver ink pot jumped, overturned, and poured a black river into his lap. Elias played 3 bright notes by accident. Adrian said, Master Quill. Apologies, Majesty. My fingers believe in justice. Varick stood with ink soaking his fine black trousers. This is an insult. I demand a full moon trial. Granted, Adrian said at once. That startled everyone. Even Aloan. A full moon trial was public, old, and dangerous. The accused stood before the moon pool, repeated the disputed rite, and allowed the guardian to judge scent and water. It could ruin a house before the whole court. It could also ruin the accuser if the moon found no fault. Cedric seized the chance. Excellent. Let her prove her fantasies in public. Aloan's throat tightened. Adrian looked at her, not with doubt, but with a question he would not force aloud. She thought of the net in winter. The swan's sharp beak. The cold shame of Cedric's rejection. Rowena's frightened hands. Robin's eyes flying to Varick. The green vial. Yes, Aloan said. In public. Cedric smiled. It was the old smile, the one that had once made her think him charming before she learned charm could be a painted door on an empty room. Careful, Aloan. When this fails, no king's dance will save you. Adrian's voice was quiet. When you speak her name, lower your pride. Cedric flushed. Aloan should not have enjoyed it. She enjoyed it very much. The trial was set for the next night because the full moon would rise over the eastern pool at 9 bells. That gave Aloan 1 day to find the shape of the trap before she walked into it. The day did not begin wisely. Lady Purnell Vale cornered her in the tapestry hall with 2 cousins, 3 accusations, and a perfume so strong Aloan's wolf senses briefly considered leaving without her. You have always been ungrateful, Purnell said, blocking the corridor. My son offered you a place far above your breeding. He offered me vows, Aloan said. I notice breeding is mentioned most by people who misplace theirs. One cousin gasped. The other looked down to hide a smile. Purnell's eyes sharpened. Do not imagine the king wants you. Men like him protect broken things for amusement. The words landed, but not where Purnell wanted. They landed on the old bruise, yes, but Aloan had been given a strange new advantage. She was tired of being manageable. Lady Purnell, she said, if His Majesty collects broken things, I expect he already owns several mirrors from your house. The cousin who had hidden her smile made a strangled sound. Purnell lifted her hand. Aloan saw it coming. She caught the woman's wrist before the slap landed. Pernenfros. Aloan leaned close. I'm trying very hard to be elegant today. Please do not overestimate my commitment. The black swan appeared at the end of the hall. No one knew how. It was one of her gifts. Purnell dropped her hand. This is absurd. The swan charged. All three Vale women scattered. Purnell backed into a laundry cart, sat abruptly among warm sheets, and rolled 3 dignified feet before striking the wall. Dame Mabel came around the corner, looked at the scene, and said, I've always said clean linen improves a lady. Aloan pressed a hand over her mouth. The swan stole one lace glove from Purnell and trotted away. It was not a productive interrogation, but it helped Aloan's mood. Her next stop was the lake kitchen, where Tessa swore the water barrels had been changed before the ball by order of a tall lord with a black ring. Varric wore such a ring. So did half the court. That was not enough. What did he smell like? Aloan asked. Tessa frowned. Rosemary smoke. Old leather. Fear. Fear. Yes. Not frightened fear. Angry fear. The kind that wants a door locked. Aloan understood that more than she wanted to. They searched the pool steps and found nothing but a pearl hairpin, a wine cork, and the Black Swan's hidden collection of ribbons, spoons, and one small portrait of Cedric with the eyes pecked out. She has taste, Tessa said. She has a criminal instinct. Also taste. The swan preened. At noon, Adrian joined them beside the frozen reed beds wearing a plain dark cloak instead of court velvet. 2 guards lingered far enough away to pretend not to listen. Your Majesty, Aloan said. Lady Brightmere. Tessa curtsied so quickly she nearly dropped a bucket. The swan ignored him, which seemed to please him. Have you eaten? He asked Aloan. You keep asking that. People forget when hunted. She looked at him. The winter light made his eyes clearer, almost silver blue. Is that from experience? Yes. He said it simply. No decoration. No invitation to pity. It made her wonder what kind of boy had become this controlled man. She did not ask. Not yet. Instead, she held up the pearl hairpin. We found this near the lower pool step. Adrian took it. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief and indecently memorable. Aloan blamed the cold. Rowena wore pearls last night, he said. Many ladies did. Cedric's mother took yours. Aloan looked up. He should not have known that. Or perhaps kings were told everything. The thought did not comfort her. Did Cedric tell you? No. Dame Mabel did, while threatening my steward over starch. Dame Mabel is dangerous. I rely on her. Aloan smiled despite herself, then sobered. If Rowena helped poison the cup, she may still be trapped by her father. You pity her? I do not like her. That was not my question. She looked across the pool. The black swan floated between broken reeds, pretending not to listen. I know what it is to be useful to someone else's ambition. Rowena chose cruelty, but I'm not sure she chose freely. Adrian studied her. Most people become smaller after humiliation. I considered it, and the floor was cold. His laugh was low and sudden. It did something alarming to her knees. He stepped closer. Aloan. It was the first time he had used only her name. Not in public. Not as a claim. Still, it moved through her like warm wine. Yes, tonight may turn ugly. That seems likely. We have scheduled truth after supper. If you are afraid, say so. I am afraid. His gaze sharpened. She lifted her chin. I'm also going. I know. Then why ask? Because courage that is never allowed to admit fear becomes another cage. For a moment she could not answer. The black swan chose that tender silence to climb from the pool, shake icy water over both of them, and honk. Aloan sputtered. Adrian closed his eyes as water ran down his cheek. Tessa whispered, She says you're standing too close to the reeds. Aloan looked at the bird. She says that, or she wanted attention. Adrian wiped water from his jaw. Both are consistent with her character. The swan nipped his boot. And royal judgment, he added. Aloan laughed so hard she had to grip the stone rail. Adrian watched her as if the laugh itself had become evidence. The day grew darker. By late afternoon, the court had chosen sides with the intelligence of chickens in a thunderstorm. Some said Aloan had bewitched the king. Some said Cedric had been cursed. Some said the swan was a Blackthorn spy. That rumor ended when the swan chased Lord Pember through the gallery after he lied about honeycakes again. Aloan questioned Rowena near the chapel garden, where dead roses clung to the walls and the air smelled of frost. Rowena arrived alone, wrapped in a pale cloak. Without jewels and a crowd, she looked younger. Not innocent, but tired. You wanted to speak, Rowena said. Yes. If you are here to enjoy yourself, be quick. Aloan nearly admired that. I want the truth. The truth is that Cedric chose me. Did he? Rowena's mouth tightened. Do not. I'm not asking whether he put his hand on your waist in public. I saw that. So did the swan, with strong feelings. I'm asking whether you know why he changed. Rowena looked toward the chapel windows. Men change. Conveniently, after my letters vanished, and his mother called me unclean. I did not take your letters. The swan, hidden under a rose arch with only her black tail visible, remained still. Aloan believed her. Did your father give Cedric something? Rowena's eyes flashed. My father gives advice. That is unfortunate, but not illegal. A reluctant laugh escaped Rowena before she crushed it. For one heartbeat, they were only two young women in a cold garden, both too proud to admit the day had teeth. Then Rowena whispered, He said your bloodline carried a moon sickness. He said Cedric would weaken House Vale if he bound you. He said I could save everyone embarrassment by accepting what was already decided. Did you believe him? Rowena looked at her. I wanted to. The answer stung, because it was honest. And now, Rowena's gloved hand went to her throat. Last night, when the cup rolled, he looked at me as if I were a servant who had spoken out of turn. He's never looked at Cedric like that. He uses Cedric. Yes, and you. Rowena turned away. Do you expect me to cry in your arms? No. I like this cloak. Rowena made the smallest amused sound. Aloan stepped closer. If you know something, speak tomorrow. And become what? A daughter who ruins her father. A bride no one wants. The old Aloan would have had no answer. The new one still had no easy answer, but she had a better one. You could become a woman who sleeps without listening for footsteps. Rowena's face changed. Before she could speak, Cedric strode into the garden. Rowena, he said sharply, your father wants you. Then he saw Aloan. His face softened into a performance of pain. Aloan, this has gone too far. I agree. You should have stopped at betrayal. The punch basin was avoidable. Rowena looked at the ground. Her shoulders shook once. Cedric did not notice. I was misled, Cedric said. There were rumors about you. Letters. Warnings. A man must protect his house. A man might also ask his promised bride a question before declaring her filth in front of half the county. He winced. Good. I made mistakes, he said. But the king is using you. You think he sees you? You are a weapon against Blackthorn. When this ends, he will set you down. The fear was too precise. Aloan felt it strike. Cedric knew where old wounds were because he had helped place them. From the rose arch came a low hiss. Cedric glanced down and paled. Call it off. I do not command her. You command everyone now, do you? He stepped close and lowered his voice. You belong with me. I was your first choice. Aloan looked at him properly. He was handsome. He had always been handsome in the easy golden way that made older women forgive him and younger ones soften. But something in her had shifted. Beside Adrian's controlled fire, Cedric's charm looked like candle grease. You were my mistake, she said. Do not flatter yourself into a ring. Cedric's face twisted. He reached for her. The swan exploded from the rose arch. Cedric yelped and leaped backward, struck a frozen fountain, and sat in it. Thin ice cracked under him. Water splashed to his waist. Rowena stared. Aloan stared. The swan climbed onto the fountain rim and beat her wings at him like a tiny black storm. Cedric shouted for help. Elias Quill, passing beyond the garden wall, called, Is that a request for music? No, Cedric shouted. Elias began playing anyway. By twilight, Eloan had enough pieces to know the trap existed and not enough to close it. That was when someone tried to lock her in the Old West Tower. She had followed a message supposedly from Tessa, asking her to meet by the stair where pool pipes ran through the wall. The corridors smelled wrong, not of lake damp and rush candles, but rosemary smoke and old leather. She turned to leave. The door slammed. Darkness swallowed the stair. Eloan ran to the door and shoved. It held. She heard a bar drop outside. For one breath, she was a child again in the granary after her brother's cruel game, pounding until her palms hurt. Then she was Cedric's unwanted bride, shut out from every answer. Then she was herself, grown, angry, and not in the mood. Fine, she said to the dark. We are climbing. The stairs spiraled up to a narrow watchroom. Wind slipped through arrow slits. Eloan found an old stool, a rusty brazier, and a rope used for signal flags. She tied the rope to the brazier frame, wedged it through a slit, and looked down. The drop was horrible. The courtyard below looked very hard. This is a bad plan, she told herself. From below came a familiar honk. The black swan stood in the snow, looking up with deep disapproval. I did say it was bad. Another sound cut through the wind. A low growl. A huge wolf stepped from the archway below. It was silver black, taller than any wolf should be, with broad shoulders, blue eyes, and white markings at the front paws like gloves made of moonlight. It looked up at Eloan with such fierce focus that her heart slammed against her ribs. Adrian. She knew without being told. Not an animal. Not a beast. A king in another truth of his body. The wolf gave one sharp bark that somehow sounded like an order and an insult to the architecture. I am aware, Eloan called. The tower is poorly designed. The wolf backed, gathered itself, and leaped to the lower ledge with impossible power. Stone cracked under its claws. The swan flapped below as if supervising. Eloan lowered the rope. If you're about to tell me to wait meekly, bark twice so I can ignore you with accuracy. The wolf's ears tilted. He climbed. Not like a human. Not like an animal either. Like moonlight had remembered teeth. He reached the window slit, shifted in a blur of shadow and silver, and Adrian's human hand closed around the stone. Eloan grabbed his wrist. He came through the narrow opening with a scrape of cloth and a muttered word kings probably should not know. For one breath they were pressed together in the cramped watch room, her hands on his shoulders, his body hard and warm against hers, the wind pulling at her hair around them. His hair was damp from snow. His eyes were too bright. You are hurt, she whispered. No. Your sleeve is torn. The tower offended me. Did you bite it? Not enough. She laughed, but it shook. His hands rose to her arms, then stopped as if he had to ask permission, even while his face looked ready to kill the door. Eloan, he said, who sent the message? It used Tessa's name. It smelled of rosemary smoke. His jaw tightened. Varric, or someone wearing his scent. Even now you are fair. I am trapped in a tower. Fairness may be temporary. His hands settled at her waist. The room became smaller. He had touched her at the dance with courtly purpose. This was different. This was heat through cold cloth, his thumbs firm at the curve of her waist, his head bent because he was so tall the low roof forced him close. Her unbound hair slid over his knuckles, and his breath changed. I should step back, he said. He did not. The room is small, she said. It is not that small. No. The honesty hung between them. His gaze moved over her face, her mouth, the pulse at her throat. Not greedy. Not polite. Hungry, held on a chain. Ask me to step back, he said. Eloan's fingers tightened in his torn sleeve. She thought of Cedric saying the king would set her down. She thought of Rowena's fear. She thought of every person who had treated her as a thing to be chosen, removed, or used. Then she looked at Adrian, who had crossed a wall in wolf form, and still asked. Not yet, she said. His breath left him. He leaned closer, slowly enough that she could turn away. Below, the black swan honked. They both froze. Another honk, sharper. Then a shout in the stairwell. Adrian closed his eyes. I am beginning to understand Cedric's anger toward the bird. Eloan laughed into his chest, helpless and furious with timing. He smiled against her hair for half a heartbeat. Then he moved her behind him and turned toward the barred door. Stay close. I thought you might say stay behind. I am learning your habits. The door burst inward under one kick. Two masked men stood beyond it with clubs. They had time to see the king, recognize him, and reconsider several life choices. Adrian caught the first by the collar and threw him into a stack of old shields. Aloan seized the rusty brazier handle and swung at the second man's knees. He went down with a howl that suggested he had expected a softer lady. I warned everyone about throwing things, she said. Adrian glanced at the groaning man. You did. The swan waddled up the stairs, late but determined, and bit the first man's ear through his mask. By the time guards arrived, the assassins were tied with signal rope, the swan had stolen both masks, and Aloan was wearing Adrian's cloak because he had draped it around her shoulders with a silence more intimate than speech. The captured men claimed Cedric had paid them. Aloan did not believe it. Cedric was vain, weak, and cruel when cornered, but the tower smelled of Varric. The men also looked too frightened of someone else. She told Adrian so as they crossed back through the courtyard. Cedric benefits, he said. Cedric benefits from many things he does not have the imagination to plan. Adrian looked down at her. Snow caught in his black hair. That may be the most merciful insult I have heard. I can do worse with rest. I look forward to it. His tone made the words feel less like a royal comment and more like a promise made near a locked door. Aloan pulled his cloak tighter and pretended the warmth she felt belonged entirely to the wool. The night before the trial, sleep did not come. Aloan sat in the east chamber while Tessa dozed in a chair by the hearth, and the black swan slept in a copper bathtub that servants had dragged in after she refused the rug. The swan had arranged 3 stolen ribbons around herself like a nest of evidence. Near midnight, a soft knock sounded. Aloan opened the door with a candlestick in hand, ready to make another poor plan. Rowena stood outside. Her hair was unpinned. Her face was bare. She held a packet of letters against her chest. I need to come in, Rowena whispered. Aloan stepped aside. The swan opened one eye. Rowena looked at the bathtub. Of course, she has better lodging than I do. She has royal tenure. Tessa woke with a start and grabbed a poker. Oh, it is the red silk lady. Rowena winced. I deserve that. No one spoke for a moment. Then Rowena held out the packet. Your letters, she said. Some of them. I found them in my father's chapel chest. Aloan could not move. The packet was tied with her own blue thread. Her handwriting crossed the folded papers. Cedric's name on the front. All the small hopeful sentences she had written before she knew hope could be intercepted and used as kindling. He told me they were forged, Rowena said. He told me you were unstable, clinging sick. I believed him because it made me safe. I like being safe. Aloan took the letters. Her fingers shook. Rowena swallowed. There is more. A ledger. Payments to a marsh apothecary for stilling draft. Orders for iron nets. A note about the guardian. He meant to trap her before the blessing, but she came anyway. The swan rose in the tub with majestic rage, tangled herself in a ribbon, and nearly fell over. Tessa rushed to help. Careful, your darkness. Aloan stared at Rowena. Why bring this to me? Rowena's eyes filled, but no tears fell. Because when I asked him whether he poisoned Cedric too, he laughed. He said men like Cedric only need a story that makes cowardice look wise. Aloan closed her eyes. That sounded true. Cedric had not been drugged into betrayal. He had been offered an excuse. It hurt worse and cleaner. He also said after the trial he would send me to a convent until I learned gratitude, Rowena continued. I have never been devout enough for that much laundry. Tessa snorted. Aloan looked at the woman who had stood beside Cedric at the dais and smiled over her ruin. She wanted to hate Rowena simply. It would have been easier. But Rowena stood there with stolen letters, bare face, in fear she had finally decided not to obey. You will testify? Aloan asked. Rowena nodded. Publicly. Her mouth trembled. If I faint, pour water on me. Not poison water. Ordinary water. Aloan almost smiled. Agreed. The swan climbed from the tub, trailing ribbons, crossed the rug, and bit Rowena's hem. Rowena flinched. Oh. Tessa said, that was gentle. It did not feel gentle. Then she respects you. Rowena looked at Aloan as if unsure whether to laugh or apologize again. I'm sorry, she said. The words were small compared to the damage. They were also the first honest bridge between them. Aloan held the letters to her chest. Be braver tomorrow than you were yesterday. Rowena nodded. I will try. Trying counts, Tessa said. Unless you are milking goats. Then it either works or everyone knows. The swan honked in agreement. The full moon trial drew every noble, servant, guard, priest, gossip, and kitchen boy in Moonmere Castle. By 8 bells the ballroom had been transformed. The moon pool shimmered at the far end beneath open windows. Silver lamps circled the dais. The blessing table stood before the water with 2 cups, a pitcher, and a bowl of moon salt. Elias Quill sat with the royal musicians, pale as cheese. "What will you play?" Aloan asked him before the trial began. Something dignified, and if someone falls in the pool, something faster. He lifted his small harp. "Lady Brightmere, for what it is worth, half the servants are betting on the swan." "Only half. The other half are betting on you." That warmed her more than the crowded lamps. Adrian entered last. The hall bowed as one. Aloan did not. She was already standing on the dais beside the pool, as the guardian's witness. In a midnight blue gown the royal seamstress had altered so quickly it seemed almost witchcraft. Silver leaves edged the bodice. The skirt fell like water. Her golden hair hung in a thick braid to her hips, threaded with moonstone and one plain blue ribbon from her old life. Adrian's gaze paused on that ribbon. He took his place beside the throne, not seated. "Begin." Lord Varick came forward in formal black, ink stains hidden, arrogance restored. Cedric stood beside him in cream wool and a stiff expression. Rowena stood on the other side in red again, but this time the color looked like courage rather than conquest. Lady Purnell sat near the front with her arm in a sling from the laundry cart incident. She told everyone it was a spiritual injury. The swan stood at the pool edge, black wings folded, silver neck ring gleaming. The herald recited the charge. Poisoning of royal water. Manipulation of mate scent. False blessing. Use of iron against a moon guardian. Assault upon a royal witness. Varick smiled throughout as if listening to a child describe thunder. Then he spoke. "My king, noble court, we have seen grief become vanity. Lady Brightmere was rejected, as many women are rejected. Rather than bear it, she has turned a wild bird and a royal kindness into revenge." Murmurs rose. Aloan's throat tightened, but she looked at Adrian. "Do not look at them," he had said. "Look at me." His face gave nothing to the court. His eyes gave her steadiness. Vera continued. "The green bottle found in my case contains nerve tonic. The servant boy is confused. My daughter is loyal. Lord Cedric chose freely. No poison changed that. That last sentence was clever. It was also true enough to sting." Cedric looked down. Aloan stepped forward. "I agree." The court rustled. Varick's smile faltered. Aloan kept her voice clear. "No poison made Lord Cedric cruel. No draft forced him to call me tainted without asking for proof. No vial lifted his hand to another woman's waist in front of me. He chose those things." Cedric's face went red. She turned to him. "You are guilty of cowardice. That is not treason. Sadly for your house, it is embarrassing." Elias's harp made one approving twang. Aloan turned back to Varick. "This trial is not about whether Cedric loved poorly. It is about whether someone poisoned the royal pool to make his cowardice useful." Adrian's mouth moved almost invisibly. Varick's eyes hardened. He had expected a wounded woman flailing. He had found something more irritating. A wounded woman who had organized her anger. Aloan held up the packet of letters. "These were taken from me. Lady Rowena found them in her father's chapel chest." A roar broke through the hall. Rowena stepped forward before her father could speak. "It is true," she said. Her voice shook. It carried. Varick turned slowly. "Daughter." Rowena flinched, then straightened. "No." It was one word. It sounded like a door unlocking. She described the chest, the ledger, the payments, the plan to trap the guardian in iron netting. She did not make herself innocent. She said she had believed ugly things because believing them gave her what she wanted. She said she had let Aloan be shamed because shame on another woman felt like safety when her father held the roof above her head. The women in the gallery listened differently after that. Some looked away. Some looked down at their own hands. Lady Beatrice Ormond, one of Rowena's former whispering friends, rose unexpectedly. She was a sharp-faced blonde with too many diamonds and a conscience that appeared to have arrived late but dressed well. "I heard Lord Varick tell Lady Purnell that a woman without witnesses is a purse without strings," Beatrice said. I laughed. "I should not have." Lady Purnell hissed, sit down. The black swan walked into the audience and bit the toe of Purnell's shoe. Purnell shrieked and kicked. Her shoe flew off, struck Lord Pember in the chest, and knocked a honey cake from his pocket. The hall went silent. Lord Pember whispered, "That is from yesterday." Elias began playing the village flower song. Adrian lifted one hand. Elias stopped, but he was smiling for the first time that night. Beatrice kept standing. Lady Brightmere was mocked because it was easy. I helped. I will help undo it. Aloan had not expected that. Her eyes stung. She nodded once. Two women. One who had hurt her, one who had laughed. Both choosing something better in public. It did not erase anything. It changed what came next. Varric's calm broke. "This is theater." "Yes," Adrian said. "Court usually is. Tonight it has better actors." The king stepped to the pool. "The rite will be repeated." Varric's face went still. Cedric swallowed. Rowena closed her eyes. The blessing cups were filled before everyone. One with fresh wine. One with moon water drawn by Tessa from the deepest pool channel. Eloan watched every hand. Tessa's fingers trembled only once, and the black swan pressed close to her skirt until she steadied. The old law required that those accused speak over the cup. Varric lifted it first. "I have not poisoned this water." The swan stared. Nothing happened. A ripple of doubt moved through the hall. Eloan's stomach tightened. Then she saw Adrian's eyes narrow, not at Varric, but at the cup. The swan moved. Not to Varric. To the second cup. She nudged it with her beak. It slid across the table, stopped at Cedric's hand, then tipped. The moon water spilled over his glove and darkened the cuff. Cedric cried out as if burned. Green streaks spread from a hidden powder sewn into the glove seam. The hall exploded. Varric had not poisoned the cup. He had prepared Cedric to poison it during the public rite and make Aloan's accusation fail or turn against her. Cedric stared at his own hand with horror, so plain Aloan knew he had not understood the whole scheme. "I did not know," he said. He said it was a scent charm. He said it would prove she was lying. Aloan believed that too. It did not save him. Adrian's voice cut through the uproar. "Guards!" Varric moved fast for a narrow man. He seized Rowena by the arm and dragged her backward, one hand going to a blade hidden at his sleeve. Eloan saw Rowena's face. Not fear only. Shame that she had let herself be used this long. Eloan ran. Adrian was faster, but the crowd blocked him. The swan launched herself into Varric's face. Black wings hammered his eyes. Rowena twisted free. Varric stumbled toward the pool. Eloan grabbed the bowl of moon salt and flung it at his feet. Salt scattered over marble. Varric slipped. His arms windmilled with no dignity at all. For a splendid second, he looked like a man conducting a very angry orchestra. Then he fell backward into the moon pool. The splash reached the first 3 rows. Lady Purnell, already missing one shoe, received enough water to flatten her lace cap. Lord Pember tried to hide the honey cake and dropped it into his own sleeve. Elias Cool played one triumphant chord, so loud a violinist jumped. Varric's surface sputtering. The green powder from Cedric's glove washed into the water and turned bright beneath the moon. The swan circled him once and bit the back of his collar every time he tried to climb out before the guards arrived. "I confess nothing," Varric shouted. The swan bit again. "This is royal abuse." Another bite. "I demand dry clothes." Tessa from the pool steps said, "So did the bird when you netted her." The servants cheered. Adrian reached Eloan's side. "Are you hurt?" "No." "You ran toward a knife." "I ran toward Rowena." His eyes burned. "Those are not separate concerns to me." The words struck deeper than any public claim could have. He was angry because she was in danger, yes, but not because she had disobeyed. Because her body mattered to him in a way that made his control tremble. She swallowed. "I had salt. A devastating weapon. You mock, but he fell beautifully." Adrian looked at Varric, who was being dragged from the pool while the swan maintained a firm hold on his coat tail. He did. Cedric fell to his knees before the dais. Not a noble bow. A collapse. "Eloan," he said, voice raw. "I was fooled." She looked at him kneeling where, one night earlier, he had bowed for a false blessing with another woman at his side. "Yes. I was afraid for my house." "Yes. I should have trusted you." "Yes." His eyes filled. "Can there be any mercy?" The hall quieted. Even the swan paused. Once, Eloan would have mistaken his tears for love. Now she could see the shape of them. Some grief was for losing her. More was for losing the version of himself that had believed he was decent. She felt pity. It surprised her. Pity was not a doorway. There can be mercy, she said, but not return. He bowed his head. Lady Purnell made a wounded sound. The swan snapped at her remaining shoe. She stopped. Adrian addressed the court. Lord Varick Blackthorn is stripped of court standing pending judgment by Moonlaw. House Vale is fined for slander and false petition. Lord Cedric Vale will serve 1 year in border restoration, under guard, repairing the marsh villages harmed by Blackthorn drain works. Cedric looked up stunned. Border restoration meant mud, labor, and listening to common people describe what noble decisions had done to their roofs. Eloan approved. Lady Rowena Blackthorn, Adrian continued, is released from all marriage contracts arranged by her father. Her dowry is placed under her own seal until judgment. Rowena covered her mouth. Beatrice reached for her hand. Rowena let her. Lady Eloan Brightmere, Adrian said. Eloan's heart stopped behaving. By service to the crown, witness under guardian law, and courage before the court, you are named Royal Keeper of the Moonpool and investigator of false scent crimes. Your family lands are restored from Vale claim. Your word will carry crown weight in matters of mate fraud, poison, and guardian harm. The hall stared at her. Eloan stared at him. Royal Keeper sounded official. Investigators sounded terrifying. Crown weight sounded heavy enough to bend furniture. The swan waddled to her side and leaned against her leg. Adrian's gaze softened. Do you accept? Eloan looked at Tessa, who grinned through tears. She looked at Rowena, pale but free. She looked at Beatrice, standing as if late courage still counted. She looked at Dame Mabel, who nodded like a general after a satisfactory siege. She was not alone. That mattered more than the title. I accept, Eloan said. On one condition. The court gasped because apparently conditions to kings were rare and delicious. Adrian's mouth curved. Name it. Master Quill chooses all trial music from now on. Elias dropped his harp. Adrian considered with grave seriousness. Granted, provided he avoids the flower song during executions. Majesty, Elias said, I have limits. Do you? No, but I wish to seem professional. The court laughed. It began with servants, then spread to ladies, guards, even a few old lords who had not laughed in public since taxes were invented. The sound rose into the rafters, strange and bright. It did not erase the poison or humiliation. It made room for life after it. The swan honked along as if she had written the joke. Later, after Varick was locked in a dry cell despite his objections, after Cedric was escorted away to change from cream wool into the plain brown coat of border service, after Rowena cried once in the linen room, and then demanded tea as if tea could be a political structure, Eloan walked alone to the moon pool. Alone lasted 7 steps. Adrian joined her beneath the open windows. The ballroom was nearly empty. Moonlight silvered the marble. The pool lay dark and clean again. The black swan floated in the center with a stolen pearl pinned on her head like a crown. Tessa slept on a bench with a blanket over her. Elias snored in a chair, one hand still on his harp. Eloan leaned on the rail. You gave me an office. You earned one. It comes with a swan. Most offices have disadvantages. The swan opened one eye. Adrian added, and priceless guardians. The eye closed. Eloan smiled. Did you know the truth before the dance? No. Then why choose me? He stood beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. The guardian left the pool for you. Cedric feared your standing. Varick feared your voice. And you looked as if you had decided not to be sick on anyone's shoes, which suggested discipline. She laughed softly. That was my exact ambition. A noble one. You turned it into treason inquiry. The evening was dull. She turned to him. No, truly. His humor faded. Because when Cedric insulted you, you did not beg the room to believe you. You looked at the floor, breathed once, and stayed. That is not weakness. That is someone holding a door shut from the inside. Eloan's throat tightened. I was tired. Yes. Angry. Yes. Embarrassed. I know. Do you? His eyes held hers. I know what it is to stand in a room where people have decided your story before you speak. There it was again, a glimpse through the crown. Not enough to make him smaller. Enough to make him real. I am still afraid you will set me down when this becomes inconvenient, she said. The honesty cost her. It also freed her lungs. Adrian turned fully toward her. I will not pretend I am gentle enough to want you only where court law permits. Her breath caught. Adrian. His name changed there. I want you at my table, he said. In my councils. On every dance floor where cowards hoped you would vanish. I want your laughter in rooms that are too quiet. I want your anger turned where it belongs. I want your hand in mine when it is offered freely, and I want to be the man you look for when the music stops. Her pulse beat everywhere. The words were not respectful in a mild, distant way poets praise statues. They were controlled fire. Possession held back by reverence. Desire wearing a crown but kneeling in its own way. That is a great deal of wanting, she whispered. I have been restrained all evening. Have you? Painfully, she should have looked away. She did not. The swan made a small, suspicious sound from the pool. Eloan raised a finger without turning. If you interrupt, I will tell Tessa about the spoons under the third stair. Silence. Adrian's smile was slow and dangerous. You have learned command. I had good teachers. He stepped closer. Ask me to step back. Again those words. Again the choice. Eloan lifted her hand and touched the wolf mark at his throat. The metal was cool. His skin above it was warm. She felt him still beneath her fingers. No, she said. He bent. The kiss was not gentle at first. It was careful, which was worse for her knees. His mouth found hers with the restraint of a man holding back a storm and the hunger of the storm itself. Eloan gripped his coat because the floor had become theoretical. His hand slid to her waist, then her back, drawing her closer with a sound low in his throat when she answered. She had been kissed before. She had not been kissed like a country being reclaimed by its own queen. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. Her lips tingled. His breathing was not as even as kings likely preferred. From the pool came a delicate splash. The swan had turned around to face the wall. Eloan laughed against Adrian's mouth. She has manners after all. She is pretending. So are we. I am done pretending. He kissed her again, softer this time, and somehow more ruinous. The next morning, Moonmere Castle woke with a headache and a new order. Lord Varric's confession did not arrive at breakfast, despite the swan's request to be present for questioning. It came near noon, after Tessa identified the iron netmaker, Robin confirmed the changed water order, and Beatrice produced 3 ladies who had heard Varric's men spreading rumors about Eloan's blood. The evidence became less like a thread and more like a cart rolling downhill. Varric admitted to purchasing the draft. He claimed it was for research. When asked why research required Cedric's glove seam, he requested a priest. When the priest arrived, Varric requested a lawyer. When the lawyer arrived, the swan bit the lawyer's satchel and found 2 stolen vials inside. The lawyer requested another lawyer. Adrian sentenced Varric to forfeiture of his court estates, 5 years of labor funding the marsh repairs, and a lifetime ban from royal water, which sounded poetic until Tessa explained it included the castle baths. Varric fainted. The swan looked pleased. Lady Purnell tried to leave early in a carriage packed with unpaid jewels. Dame Mabel found her. The jewels were returned. Purnell was given a broom and a public order to fund the laundry wages she had cut for 10 years. She declared her heart broken. Dame Mabel said, "Then sweep carefully around the pieces." Cedric departed for the border under guard. Before he left, he asked to speak with Eloan. Adrian did not forbid it. He stood across the courtyard, close enough to intervene, far enough to let her own ending belong to her. The choice warmed her more than if he had roared. Cedric wore plain brown wool. Without embroidered cuffs, he looked younger and less certain. "I will do the work," he said. "Good. I did love you in my way." Eloan watched snow melt on the stones. "Your way needed witnesses and profit." He flinched. "I know. I hope you learn a better way before you ask anyone to trust you again. Do you hate me?" She thought about it. The old wound, the public shame, the cup, the glove, his tears, his cowardice. "Not enough to carry you with me," she said. He nodded as if that hurt and helped. "He will marry you." Eloan looked toward Adrian. The king stood with Captain Orsane, black cloak moving in the wind. He was not watching Cedric. He was watching her and not hiding it well. "That will be my decision," she said. Cedric gave a sad little laugh. "Yes, it would be." The carriage took him away. Aloan did not cry. She did go to the moon pool and sit beside the black swan, who rested her head in Aloan's lap like a creature who had never once threatened a nobleman's trousers. "You are a fraud," Aloan told her. The swan made a soft noise and stole the ribbon from Aloan's braid. Rowena stayed at court. At first, people watched her with the sharp delight courts reserve for a fallen beauty. Rowena met it with a lifted chin, but Aloan saw the tremble in her hands when voices dropped behind fans. So Aloan did something she did not feel noble enough to enjoy. She invited Rowena to tea. Not private tea, which would look like secret plotting. Public tea in the East Gallery with Tessa, Beatrice, Dame Mabel, and the Black Swan, who stood on a cushion and supervised the biscuits. The court could not decide whether this was forgiveness, punishment, or fashion. It became fashion by accident. Older ladies arrived first, pretending concern for moonpool law. Then younger women came, curious about scent fraud and whether a guardian bite left a scar. Within a week, the East Gallery tea became a place where women told stories they had swallowed for years. Letters taken, matches forced, rumors planted, proof supplied by men who benefited from it. Aloan listened. Rowena listened too. Sometimes she apologized to women she had mocked. Sometimes they accepted. Sometimes they did not. Beatrice wrote names in a ledger with viciously pretty handwriting. Tessa learned to pour tea while asking questions that made Baron sweat. The swan ate 12 biscuits and bit only 1 viscount, which everyone agreed showed growth. Adrian visited when he could, always with some official excuse. A document to sign, a guard report, a question about pool channels. Once he came holding a ribbon in 2 fingers. "Your guardian left this in my council chamber," he said. Aloan recognized it as one of her blue ribbons. "Did she?" "On my chair." A subtle message. She also removed my ink stopper. Less subtle. The swan, perched beside the tea tray, looked innocent in a manner that would have fooled no jury. Adrian leaned closer to Aloan under the cover of handing her the ribbon. His fingers brushed her palm. "Walk with me tonight," he murmured. Her body answered yes, so fast her mouth had to hurry. "If the moon pool does not require me, I outrank the pool." The swan hissed. "Adrian sighed. I share authority with the pool." Aloan smiled. "Better." Their walks became the court's favorite scandal and least useful gossip. They walked under arches, through frost gardens, along the battlements where the winter wind turned Aloan's hair into a golden banner. Adrian spoke of law, border pacts, and the old guardians who wore animal shapes when the moon asked. Aloan spoke of Brightmere Marsh, her father's practical kindness, her mother's songs, and the years she had spent believing a woman's value could be measured by who kept his promise to her. Sometimes they did not speak. Silence with Cedric had always been a room waiting for her to decorate it. Silence with Adrian was weather. It moved around them, alive. One night, while the stars burned cold over the battlements, he shifted into his wolf form at her request. The huge silver-black wolf stood in the snow with blue eyes, white front paws, an expression that somehow remained royal despite the black swan trying to place a ribbon over one ear. Aloan covered her mouth. "You look offended." The wolf sneezed when the ribbon brushed his nose. The swan honked triumphantly. "Majesty," Aloan said, "your enemies would surrender immediately if they saw this." The wolf gave her a look. "Not from fear," she added. "From confusion." He shifted back, black coat reforming around him in moon shadow, hair slightly disordered, dignity only partly restored. "You enjoy danger," he said. "I enjoy your face when robbed of ceremony. A dangerous confession. Will I be arrested?" "No." He stepped close, snow crunching beneath his boots. "Courted." The words struck sparks through her. "Is that official?" "Deeply." "Will there be forms?" "Several." "I will burn them." "Efficient." His gloved hand lifted to her braid, where the swan's stolen ribbon had been tied again. He touched it with a tenderness that made her humor soften. "I do not want to become another decision men make in council," she said. "Then we will not start there." "Where do we start?" He leaned down until his mouth hovered over hers. "With you deciding whether I may kiss you in a wind cold enough to punish us both. That sounds medically unwise. I can provide warmth. Royal service is broad." His smile touched her lips. "Say yes, Aloan." She did. The kiss was brief because the battlement wind was vicious and because the swan landed beside them with all the grace of a thrown pillow. But Adrian's cloak came around Aloan's shoulders, his arms came around the cloak, and for several breaths she forgot winter entirely. Trouble did not end with Varric's fall. It changed clothes. A faction of old lords disliked Aloin's new office because it gave crown weight to women who had previously been expected to suffer quietly. They could not attack Adrian directly. They could not deny the swan without risking their trousers. So they chose the ancient strategy of men with weak arguments. They formed a committee. The Committee for Preservation of Proper-Made Customs met in West Solar and produced a petition saying Lady Brightmere's office encouraged female unrest, excessive testimony, and informal tea. Aloin read the petition aloud to Tessa, Rowena, Beatrice, Dame Mabel, and Elias. Informal tea, Beatrice said. At last, our crime. Tessa looked worried. Should the tea be more formal? Dame Mabel said, no. It tastes better rebellious. Elias raised a finger. As a musician, I object to excessive testimony only when not set to rhythm. The swan ate the corner of the petition. Aloin took the remains to Adrian's council. The old lords expected Adrian to dismiss it with royal force. Instead, he sat at the head of the table and let Aloin speak. She did not speak like a noble born to command. She spoke like a woman who had stood in the corner with cold wine while men arranged shame around her, and she spoke for every woman who had written to the East Gallery since. Proper mate custom, she said, cannot mean a woman must be disbelieved until she drowns. If a bond can be praised in public, it can be questioned in public when poison, forged letters, or force are used. If that creates unrest, perhaps rest was too expensive. One lord snorted. You speak above your rank. The swan, waiting by the door, lunged. The lord jumped onto his chair. Adrian looked at him. Do continue your argument from there. It gives you height. The council clerk coughed into his sleeve. Aloin turned to the lord. My rank was just used as your argument because your evidence arrived empty. Another lord, older and less foolish, asked, and what limit do you propose? Shall every jilted girl accuse every reluctant man? No, Aloin said. Reluctance is not a crime. Cowardice is not treason. But hidden drafts, stolen letters, iron nets, false scent charms, forced contracts, and public slander presented as moon law will be investigated. By procedure. With witnesses. Including men, if men find themselves harmed by the same tricks. The old lord leaned back. That is reasonable. He sounded disappointed. Adrian's gaze rested on Aloin with such fierce pride that she had to look at the inkstand. The office survived. The committee did not. Its chair resigned after the swan followed him for 2 days and honked whenever he said the word proper. Winter deepened. Brightmere lands were restored, though Aloin did not return to live there at once. She sent funds for the marsh roofs and asked her aunt to oversee repairs. Her own place for now was Moonmere, where the pool needed guarding and women came with stories wrapped in shame. Rowena became unexpectedly skilled at reading ledgers. She could spot a false payment faster than Elias could find a wrong tune. Beatrice used her gossip network for better purposes and looked annoyed by how much she enjoyed it. Tessa learned letters in the evenings, head bent over parchment, tongue caught between her teeth. Dame Mabel taught her numbers by counting missing napkins and unpaid wages. Aloin watched them become a kind of household not made by blood or marriage contract. A strange one. A loud one. One with too many biscuits and a moon guardian in the bathtub. It was hers. One clear evening, Adrian asked Aloin to meet him in the ballroom where the first dance had happened. She arrived in a gown of soft ivory with silver thread at the sleeves. Not bridal, not court armor, simply beautiful. Her hair fell loose to her hips, bright as candle gold. At her throat she wore the moonstone pendant Tessa had given her, a pearl pin Rowena had insisted she keep, and the blue ribbon she had kept for herself. The ballroom was empty except for Adrian, Elias with his harp, and the black swan sitting suspiciously near the punch basin. Aloin stopped. If this is a trial, the attendance is poor. Adrian stood in the center of the floor, wearing black formal court dress, silver at the collar, no crown. Without it, he did not look less kingly. He looked more dangerous. No trial, he said. Elias lifted his harp. I am here under emotional duress. You volunteered, Adrian said. Yes, but with feeling. The swan honked. Aloin looked from one to the other. Should I be worried? A little, Adrian said. He walked to her and held out his hand, just as he had the night the court expected her to vanish. The first dance was law, he said. This one is mine to ask. Her heart rose. And mine to refuse? Always. She placed her hand in his. Elias began a slow waltz, tender and warm, with only one suspicious flourish near the second turn. Adrian's hand came to Eloan's waist. The ballroom moved around them as it had before, but everything was changed. The marble no longer felt like a battlefield. The lamps no longer looked like watching eyes. Cedric was not there. Varric was not there. Shame was not there, except as a ghost that had lost its room. Adrian drew her closer than court allowed, with no court present to object. "You are very quiet," he said. "I'm trying not to be sick on your shoes." His laugh was soft and immediate. "Still a noble ambition. I have grown. I might aim for your hem." "Mercy." They turned beneath the lamps. "Eloan," he said, "I will ask you something. Not before counsel. Not before witnesses. Here first." Her fingers tightened on his shoulder. "I want you as my mate," he said. "My queen, if you choose that road. My critic when I become too fond of my own decrees. My partner-in-law in laughter, in every dark room where someone needs a door opened. I want to wake with your hair across my arm and sleep knowing your knives are pointed outward unless I deserve otherwise." Her eyes stung. "That is nearly romantic." "Nearly." The knives helped. He smiled, but his eyes were not teasing now. "I love you." The words entered her quietly, like light under a door. She had once thought love was a vow someone else kept or broke. Now it stood before her as a choice she could make with her whole self awake. "I love you," she said, "and I will not be hidden behind your crown. You would bite through it. I have been learning from an expert." The swan preened. "I will be your mate," Eloan said. "I will be queen if the work is real and the gowns have pockets." Adrian's composure broke into a smile, so beautiful it made him look almost young. "Every gown, written into law." Before supper, he kissed her in the center of the ballroom. Elias played bravely for 12 seconds before the melody became suspiciously triumphant. The swan flapped her wings and knocked over a small stand of flowers. Tessa, Rowena, Beatrice, and Dame Mabel burst from behind the gallery curtains where they had been hiding with the subtlety of falling cookware. Eloan pulled back and stared. Rowena wiped her eyes. "We were invited by the swan." Tessa nodded. "She bit my shoe and led us here." Dame Mabel said, "I came for quality control." Beatrice held up a handkerchief. "I came because if I am to become a better woman, I need excellent material." Adrian looked at the swan. "You promised privacy." The swan blinked. Elias said, "To be fair, Majesty, she cannot speak." The swan honked. "She can lie by omission," Adrian said. Eloan began laughing. She laughed until she leaned into Adrian's chest and he held her there, one arm around her waist, his mouth against her hair, while the women she had never expected to love clapped and cried and argued about whether the queen's gown should have inner pockets or dramatic outer ones. The answer, eventually, was both. Spring came to Moonmere with thaw water, court reforms, and a black swan who had taken to wearing a different stolen ribbon each day. Eloan's bonding ceremony with Adrian was held by the moon pool at dusk. It was not the largest wedding the kingdom had seen. Adrian offered. Eloan declined. She had endured enough public spectacle to last 3 lifetimes and 1 afterlife. Instead, the hall held the people who mattered, and a few old lords who had been invited because reform was healthier when it had to watch happiness. Eloan wore a pale silver gown that moved like mist, with a fitted waist, soft sleeves, and hidden pockets large enough for a handkerchief, a note, and 1 emergency biscuit. Her golden hair fell loose below her hips, shining beneath a circlet of moonstone and small pearls returned for House Vale after Dame Mabel visited with an inventory. Adrian wore black and silver, tall, controlled, devastatingly handsome, and visibly impatient with the priest's long speech. Eloan leaned toward him. "You look ready to invade the sermon. It has weak borders. Behave." "I am restrained." Painfully, his eyes lowered to her mouth. "Always near you." Her cheeks warmed. The priest coughed and skipped 2 paragraphs, perhaps out of mercy. They spoke vows before the pool. Not vows of ownership. Not vows polished until no one could live inside them. They promised truth before comfort, laughter before pride when possible, fierce defense when necessary, and no poison in any cup under any roof they ruled. The black swan carried the rings in a velvet pouch around her neck. This had seemed charming in planning. In practice, she refused to release the pouch until Adrian gave her a sugared almond. "This is extortion," he said. The swan looked at the almond. Eloan whispered, "Pay the guardian. I negotiate treaties with mountain packs. Do they bite? Less often. He paid. The swan released the rings and then attempted to eat the ribbon from the priest's book. When Adrian placed the ring on Aloan's finger, his hand was steady. When she placed his breath caught. Only she heard it. Only she saw the brief flash of naked feeling beneath the king. Mine, his eyes said, but not like Cedric had meant it. Not possession as a cage. Possession as a vow to stand between her every door that tried to lock. Aloan's own wolf rose beneath her skin, golden and glad. She smiled up at him. Ours, her eyes answered. The bond settled like moonlight through water. No thunder. No choir of spirits. Just Adrian's hand tightening around hers and the quiet certainty that she had not been chosen instead of another woman. She had been met. Then Elias played the wrong song. It began with one dignified chord and somehow became the flower song. The priest blinked. Rowena burst into tears of laughter. Beatrice dropped her handkerchief. Tessa clapped both hands over her mouth. Dame Mabel said, "At least it has rhythm." Adrian looked at Elias. Elias looked at the harp. Majesty, the strings remembered justice. Aloan laughed so hard Adrian had to steady her. "My queen," he murmured. "Shall I have him arrested?" "No." "Promote him." "To what?" "Minister of poor timing." A powerful office. Essential. The feast afterward was loud, warm, and only partly dignified. Rowena danced with Captain Orsane and stepped on his foot twice. Beatrice flirted with Elias by insulting his sense of rhythm until he turned red. Tessa was asked to dance by Robin, who had stopped sweating now that treason no longer stood behind him. Dame Mabel corrected a duke's table manners and won. Lady Purnell, invited under strict supervision because Aloan believed mercy should occasionally make everyone uncomfortable, tried to say the ceremony lacked refinement. The swan appeared beneath her chair. Purnell reconsidered and said the biscuits were excellent. Cedric did not attend. He sent a letter from the border, brief and awkward, saying the marsh roofs were mended, the villagers had opinions, and he was learning to listen before speaking. Aloan read it, felt the old egg stir once, and let it go. She was not alone in a corner anymore. After the feast, Adrian drew her away to the moon pool balcony. Music and laughter spilled behind them. Below, the water held the reflection of the full moon, round and bright as a promise. Aloan leaned against the stone rail, silver skirts moving in the wind. Adrian stood behind her, his hands on a rail on either side, surrounding but not trapping. His mouth touched the place behind her ear where the bond still hummed. "Queen Aloan," he said. She shivered. "That sounds like trouble." "It is." "Good." His laugh brushed her skin. "Are you happy?" She looked back through the balcony doors. Tessa was dancing badly and joyfully. Rowena was laughing with Beatrice. Elias was playing something almost respectable. Dame Mabel was guarding the cake. The black swan was dragging a nobleman's napkin under a bench for reasons known only to law and appetite. Then Aloan looked at Adrian, the most beautiful man in the kingdom, and the most dangerous man to anyone who mistook her kindness for weakness. "Yes," she said, "not because nothing hurts. Because nothing owns me." His expression changed, soft and fierce. "And because," she turned in his arms, "because when the music stopped, you asked me to dance. I would ask again, then ask." He stepped back, bowed, and held out his hand. "My queen," he said, "the next dance, and every one after, if you will have me." Aloan placed her hand in his. From below, the swan honked as if approving the contract. "Adrian sight. She will be in our lives forever." "Yes." "She will interrupt important moments." "Certainly." "She will steal from visiting ambassadors. Only the dishonest ones." "That is not comforting." "It is a little comforting." He pulled her into his arms, close enough for her to feel the laugh in his chest. "I love you." "I know." That sounded royal. "I am practicing." "Try again." She rose on her toes and kissed him. "I love you too." The moon pool shone. The court laughed behind them. Her friends waited inside, not as witnesses to her rescue, but as proof of the life she had built with her own hands. The king held her as if letting go would offend the moon itself, and Aloan, who had once counted not being sick as victory, danced into the rest of her life with wine warm in her blood, silver at her throat, wind in her hair, and no intention of ever standing invisible again. Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more moonlit love.